You know what time it is?
What time is it?
Well, I'm wearing my Juventus uniform, so that means it's time to record a podcast. For everyone who doesn't know, I record the podcast in full Juventus kit.
Yeah, at all times.
Soccer socks, shin guards, cleats, authentic third jersey from Juventus FC. Bought in Torino, Italy.
Yeah.
Purchased with my own money.
Oh my God.
And yet the team has not recognized me as one of their squad. Shockingly, they have not.
They're straight up Juventusing it.
That's quite enough. How's it going, sicko? You're sick.
I am riddled.
Yes.
With viral loads.
Ew.
Oh,
so gross.
Jesus Christ.
Regular
virals.
You were about to say regular loads, and you were like, that's even grosser.
That's worse.
We are talking about a fucking good film today.
Yeah.
Because what I think, Gladiator Deux should be coming out. Gladiator Folie Deux will be coming out the day this comes out, I think.
Excellent.
If it's not, it will be soon or whatever. How excited are you for Gladiator 2?
Decent amount.
A decent amount?
Yeah.
I'm stoked. I think it's great. Yeah.
You think it's good?
I'm excited.
I mean, look, anything Denzel, sign me up.
Yeah.
I'm about that life.
You are about your
It's
Denzel
also got
life.
our most normal person of
Paul
normal
Mescal,
people,
yeah.
Paul Mescal.
But most importantly, it's directed by our
Mr.
favorite, the collective favorite director
Scott.
of this podcast.
Hell yeah.
Ridley Scottius.
Scott's Fest.
Oh, fuck yeah.
Is upon us.
No, it's not.
Okay.
No, it's not. Don't promise something you can't deliver
You're
on.
right.
This is
You're
not
right.
Scottfest.
A hint, a gentle reminder.
Much like Napoleon last year, this is just a dip into the Scott pool. Ew.
Yeah, it's where the loads
This
are.
is just slipping your fingers into the Scotts.
Sick to my stomach.
Because today we're talking about a divisive Ridley Scott film that I think fucking is awesome. I think this movie is great. I think it's great. I think it's a true cult film.
I didn't know this movie even existed.
Nope.
What a way to find out.
It's a little hidden gem.
Something like this with some of the biggest names just existed.
Yeah.
And obviously buried for good reason because mostly hate it.
Can I tell you the reason? Cameron Diaz fucks a car. Javier Bardem fucks a car. Brad Pitt fucks a car. Michael Fassbender, he also fucks the car in this. They don't get to Penelope Cruz because she gets decapitated before she can get around to fucking the
but
Ferrari.
her head.
But we'll get that out of the way right away. One of the most absurd things put on film, and just unimaginable to come from the mind of Cormac McCarthy. The writer, one of the greatest, until recently, one of the greatest living writers. May he rest in peace.
Rip.
One of the greatest American writers ever. He wrote a scene where Cameron Diaz fucks the hood of a car.
Yeah, man.
Which is
look, when
wild.
he wrote it, he wasn't like, I'm gonna make Cameron Diaz do it.
No, he probably
was like,
he probably didn't.
A crazy lady would look good if she did it this way.
Diaz is the biggest problem with this movie, and I would argue the only glaring problem in this film. I think the rest of it is quite good. Almost all of it is very good, except for Cameron's performance.
I think it's every time I see Cameron Diaz, I'm like, oh shit, it's Cameron Diaz. Not in a way that, it's this character. I'm always like, it's Cameron Diaz with like comb in her hair or whatever.
Yeah.
That movie.
It's
Cameron Diaz in The Mask.
Yeah, Cameron Diaz it's so interesting because she's been in so many good movies that she's had really good performances on. And then she's been in some like auteurist films, quite notably this and Gangs of New York, in which she's like breaking out of her mold, and it's almost always a failure.
Being Malkovich, she nailed it. She was fucking great in it.
That's an exception. You're right. So,
but even then, I'm like, shit, is Cameron Diaz doing crazy?
Yeah, it's almost like that is almost like distractingly Cameron Diaz because you're like they really like uglified Cameron Diaz up, but you are absolutely correct. She is very good in that movie. But like this movie, so you want to know the funny thing about it?
Yes.
Her character Malkina is originally from Barbados.
Oh, I heard, man.
And she had a Barbadian Bajan accent.
Yep.
And it did not test well with audiences.
What do you mean? When she said, "Oh, Nana," under my umbrella, they were like, Cameron, what do you...
Yeah. It did not test well with audiences. She had to redub all of her lines.
What do you mean? The whole movie?
Most of the film, she had to redub it.
No.
That did not make her very happy, and that's why she did not promote this film at all. But I can't blame her because A, that would be annoying, and B, it's not her strongest work. And I believe shortly after this, like, she was just done with movies, you know. But
I know,
yeah.
I feel like everyone kind of zeroed in on the hate for Cameron Diaz's role in this being too much.
They do the same with Gangs of New York. Like, Gangs of New York, I think, is one of my favorite movies. I think it's one of the best movies of that decade. And every time you hear people talk about it, they're always like, yeah, but Cameron Diaz is bad. It's like, motherfucker, it is a 3-hour and 40-minute film with one of the great performances of all time in it. And it's like, Cameron Diaz is a big part of it, and I agree she's not very good. But that movie is amazing. But yeah, it's interesting how they, you know, yeah.
They did the most. She did the most.
Yeah.
In a movie that actually is all about the most.
Kinda.
There's no nuances in this film.
No. This
is very much like a fuck around and find out, and everybody finds out.
It's interesting. This movie is actually like it's speaking of doing the most. I mean, for one, we can talk more about Cormac McCarthy. I'm a huge Cormac McCarthy fan. I've read most of his books. Mm-hmm. This movie is really dark, even by McCarthy's standards.
Yeah.
Like, the overall ending place that the characters reach is pretty bleak. However, a lot of the action and the violence and the gore is like it's dealt with very
tame.
No, I don't think it's tame, but it's dealt with very like easily, quickly, and kind of like impactfully. And yet there's conversations in this film that are like, okay, this scene is 7 minutes long because they're just talking. And I actually really like that about it. There's an extended unrated cut, which as we know, Ridley Scott is famous for, which I didn't know about, or else I would have tried to find it for us to watch. But I watched a couple scenes that were uncut. Like, there's a couple scenes that have been shortened for the theatrical cut, and the uncut versions of them are like, oh, this is fucking great. But for like the regular film going audience, Cormac McCarthy is pretty obtuse, and Manohla Dargis in her review was like, it's clear that Cormac McCarthy has never read a book on how to write a screenplay, but that's a good thing. And I have to agree that I think, like, while this movie is very simple and straightforward in its construction of the plot, the fact that, like, in a mainstream film that Ridley Scott is like, this should have been made like $50 million, which he blamed on Fox. You will never see a film written the way it's written, and it's awesome. I absolutely adore it.
It has the recipe for like an Oscar winner. It's got like makings in there, because when I watch something that typically wins an Oscar, I'm like, I should hate this, but I don't.
Yeah.
I went into this being like, everything about this makes me hate it, but not in a way that it's obvious to me. I'm just so enamored by it still. If it was anybody else, if it was any other author, director, actor combination in the same way this plot is told, I would have turned it off 20 minutes in.
If you didn't, like, if someone watched this and didn't know that Cormac McCarthy wrote it, or didn't know who Cormac McCarthy was, it would be a little more like, what is this? Like, what is this weird esoteric fucking bullshit, you know?
It's like Shakespeare. It's fucking, the whole thing with Ridley is that it feels like he removed himself from this movie and gave all dialogue to exactly the way Cormac McCarthy would have written it for. So it reads in a way that you would read a novel. The movie reads like...
It's very reminiscent of a lot of Cormac McCarthy's work in that way. Yeah. But like... He's not for everybody, obviously, but clearly he was one of the most respected authors of his time. Like, there's a reason for it. There's a complete reason for like why people like this. But in a movie, it's like movies are so, especially when you're talking about writing a film, people talk about it. It's like it's all about economy and like how can you make a scene the most economical version of that scene so as to not like you don't have these like roundabout conversations. And McCarthy obviously doesn't feel that way. For some key scenes he doesn't, but Ridley did chop it up in a way that's it has a little more like pace and snap to it. Then again, it's like, well, if it's Ridley Scott and you told me the movie is 2.5 hours, which I think the extended cut I think is 2:20.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be like, oh, no way. I'm going to be like, no, I would want to watch that one. Like Ridley Scott has improved so many of his films through recutting them and extending them,
oh my god.
And this movie, the couple scenes I watched, I was like, yeah, that's a fucking I knowing the context behind it, I accept that this is how it is, and I really like what it's
This one, The Counselor, feels like the evil cousin of No Country for Old Men.
A little,
in a way that it's just,
it has thematic similarities to No Country
it's
for Old
just like
Men.
More brutal and cutthroat, and it doesn't need to tell you why.
Yeah.
It's just you're on my turf, so this is how it is now.
It's way more nihilistic.
Good night.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a great word for it.
Yeah.
100%.
No Country for Old Men is like there, so it's interesting. There's like there's a scene with Fassbender and Pitt. We'll talk a little further about it, but when he first meets Westray, played by Brad Pitt, in the bar, and Brad Pitt is like, you got to be sure that you're in because like this is a big deal, it's a lot of money, it's a crime. So I just want to be sure that you're in. And he keeps pressing him on. He's like, you got to be sure, man. It's like, you really have to be sure. And Fassbender is so confident. And he's like, I'm definitely in. I'm like all the way in. Even after he says like, I'm all the way in, and he kind of like is prodding Pitt for advice. Brad Pitt is like, my first bit of advice, don't do this. And it's like, and Fassbender's like, yeah, whatever. Like, and it's so.
He's so glib the whole time.
And you're so like, this guy is just not, he's just stepped in too deep. Like he's just, you already know he's too deep and he's too cocky. Whereas like No Country, you at least understand the predicament that Brolin is in. Yeah. And you understand that it's like, well, yeah, like Brolin says in No Country for Old Men, is like how long would you take to stop looking for your $2 million? But he knows that it's like, but it's $2 million. Like, what can I do about it? Yeah. This film broadcasts and what's the word? Foreshadows everything that happens to everyone. Yeah. In great detail and like, dialogue. Even Fassbender is like, cool, whatever. I still need $20 million.
Here's the thing with Fassbender's character is that he matters so little, and you learn this as you go on watching this film. He matters so little that he doesn't even have a name. They never say it. He's just called
the titular counselor.
The counselor.
Yeah.
And you think it's about him. It mostly is not.
No.
He is dirt in this film.
Yes.
And just seeing I think this is some of the best acting that I've seen Fassbender do. Yeah. In that he comes in just like knowing his shit or showing the audience that he does. He's just a scumbag lawyer for scumbags. A little bit, yeah. And he's so sure of himself. And you know this like within the first minute of the film where he's in bed with Penelope Cruz and she's like, oh, my sweet boy, like put your head between my legs. And meanwhile, he says something like, this is where I learned it from Nasty Girls or something. Yeah, so you already know he's so sure of himself about how he's going to deliver every day. He thinks he knows the outcome. Mm-hmm. Closer to literally the moment that the worst thing happens to him, he's still like trying to correct someone's pronunciation. Mid conversation with the cartel guy who's Mexican and he's trying to say something like, it's going to take a
Ruben Blades.
Yeah, he's like, if you keep doing this, you need a hiatus. And then he corrects it. Oh, it's hiatus.
Hiatus, yeah.
Really?
He's like,
how do you say that? How do you spell that? And he obviously knows that he's being cocky.
His character, the counselor, he's like so at home in a certain level of scumbaggery. Oh. And like even that there's a part where he goes to see Rosie Perez in jail and like makes a joke about her giving him a blowjob or whatever.
Yeah, and she's like
and it's like so like he's so okay with that like dirty kind of like weird way of doing business that he thinks that he can be at home in this. And Westray is the only one, Brad Pitt is the only one telling him that it's like, you have to be sure that you can do this, or else it's like, it's not going to go well. Like you said, even in that conversation with the Jefe at the end, the Jefe is like, he says, I'm sort of not quoting it fully, but he says that like, actions create consequences, which create new worlds, and you have to accept the new world that you're in. And he's trying to tell him that he's like, you can't negotiate anymore. Like the world you've created is different from the world that created the actions were created in.
Yeah.
And he's like, now you've moved into a new world. And then at the end of it, he's like, would you trade your life for the woman you love? And he's like, of course. And he's like, is this a possibility? And he's like, no.
But also when he, pauses for a moment before he says, of course, and then he blurts out crying, of course, he's so incredulous that of course I would trade my life.
Yeah.
But the Jefe only laughs because, well, it's good to know that you feel that way.
Yeah.
Nothing will change the course of this, though.
Yeah.
Your fate is sealed the moment you walked on set. Like, that's...
Exactly. Yeah.
Everybody in this movie is dead man walking.
There's an interesting connection to No Country for Old Men here, which I think it struck me when I rewatched that conversation with the Jefe at the end, which is like a very long, just like phone conversation. That conversation is so funny because it's almost the climactic moment of the film, and it's Michael Fassbender sitting in a car talking on a cell phone to a guy in a mansion, and you're just like, wow, what a roaring. It looks like Ridley Scott was like, I don't know where to shoot this, let's shoot it in a car, we have no money, or something. Like, it's so wild. It's
effective though, because you're like zoomed in on Fassbender's face.
Fassbender's acting his fucking ass off there.
And
the connection, it really reminded me of the moment in No Country for Old Men when Anton Chigurh says to, I believe, Woody Harrelson, he's like, if you followed a rule in your life that brought you to this moment, what's the good of following that rule? And it's, McCarthy is so concerned with like fate and the steps people take to do what they're doing. And even Chigurh, I believe in that same conversation there, Harrelson says, he's like, listen, this doesn't have to happen this way. I can get Brolin to bring you the money. I can solve this all for everybody. And Chigurh says to him, he's like, I know something better. I know what will happen. And I know that Brolin will bring me the money and he'll place it at my feet. And it's such like McCarthy's skill with like talking about fate and destiny and just these small decisions that people make. It's like it's so interesting because he writes these stories with these interesting plots that aren't always fully clear, but then oftentimes the characters are talking about the plot in a way, because they always are like, all of his characters are also preoccupied with like, how did we get here? It's Chigurh again in No Country for Old Men. He thematically brings this up when he talks about the coin. He's like, the coin, this was printed in 1968. It traveled 12 years in all of these pockets to bring it to this moment, to make this decision for you, when he talks to the gas station attendant. And it just, that conversation with Ruben Blades and the Jefe and Michael Fassbender just reminded me of that thematic stuff that McCarthy really digs into. And I love it. I think it's fucking great. Yeah.
It's so effective. I'd argue that the only people or body not affected by fate in a way in The Counselor is the cartel. The cartel feels like godlike,
inevitable.
They're so powerful in like titans. They are.
I had the same feeling. The thing that they're not fully personified.
No, but they're like Old Testament God.
Yeah, but you see people in the cartel. You see people who kidnap Penelope Cruz. You talk to the Jefe. Yeah. There's people who kill Raynor. There's the Hornet who gets his head cut off. Yeah. You see these little tiny actors who are like the fingertips of the cartel. But the way that the cartel is actually like,
the organization itself.
The organization is this haunting thing, and it's so effective when Fassbender gets the CD and it's like, hola, and you're like, oh my God. Like, it's so scary, right? Because they aren't just one person personified. They're never the person who set up the drug deal and does all this, like the cartel manager.
Yeah.
Never seen in this film.
No.
And I agree with you. I think it's so fascinating. Like,
and it's like such a incredibly impactful sentence where Fassbender's trying to bargain, trying to like, what can I do to get out of this? Like, obviously I didn't do this on purpose. I was just the wrong guy, like wrong place, wrong time. And Javier Bardem's character, I think, says, well, the cartel, they've heard of coincidences. They don't believe in it.
That's the best line in the fucking movie. They've heard of them before. They just don't believe in them. That is such a fucking great line. Which is like, the counselor is like, how do I argue or bargain?
No reasonable doubt, my guy.
And it's and Westray says even in the first meeting between them, he's like, counselor, just so you know, all of the brutality with the cartel, that's just business. They have to keep up their appearances.
Yeah.
And he's like, he's basically saying, it's like, they won't think twice about doing the things that they have to do if this goes wrong. And it's
just process.
It's such a fucking good movie. Can we go back a little bit and talk about the production?
Hell yeah.
I know like a few things. Like I said, that there's an unrated director's cut. Really wish we could see it. I would watch it again in a heartbeat. Ridley Scott is well known for it. This movie came about through Ridley's attempts to make Blood Meridian, which is a long-held dream of many filmmakers to be able to adapt Blood Meridian, which is, some people, I think Hollywood executives have said it's kind of an unmakeable book, mostly because of the excessive and unending violence in the film, like a tree full of babies hanging, which is not something you really would see in Hollywood cinema. But it's been like a long coveted project that a long list of interesting filmmakers have tried to make. Todd Field of Tar.
No.
Andrew Dominik at one point. But Andrew Dominik is currently serving a sentence in director's jail for filming out of Marilyn Monroe's uterine canal. Ridley Scott, obviously, that would have been pretty amazing. He actually tried, this actually angers me to hear. Just after Kingdom of Heaven, he tried to develop Blood Meridian with William Monahan, the writer of Kingdom of Heaven, writing. William Monahan, who the next year went on to win an Academy Award for The Departed, my beloved film. Mm-hmm. I really wish that happened. Sounds like
the perfect
film heroine.
Minds come together.
Well, Monahan has written some bad movies, but just hearing him, we talked way back about Kingdom of Heaven, hearing him on the commentary and the way he approached writing that film, Kingdom of Heaven, which I think is an amazingly written film. I'm just like, oh, he would have been fucking so perfect for Blood Meridian.
I mean, you go off source material so tight.
Apparently in the 90s, Tommy Lee Jones had the rights to it.
Whoa.
And he wanted to direct and act in it. But that fell apart. Well, that would have been really interesting because Tommy Lee Jones is a really fascinating director. He made I could be wrong, but he made this movie that I totally didn't think would be good because it had, what's the chick from $1 Million Baby in it?
Hilary Swank, who I cannot stand as an actress. He made this movie called The Homesman. And I believe he directed it, and he had a small part in it. It's a very, very good movie. It's based off a book, and it's like a really underrated Western, kind of modern Western film. It's very, very good. And then James Franco. Apparently Andrew Dominik encouraged James Franco to direct this film. Franco was in the midst of like trying to adapt like Faulkner and shit like that. But then Franco, much like Ridley Scott, wasn't able to figure out Blood Meridian, so he adapted Child of God, which is one of McCarthy's books that I've never read. It's not a great film. And the book also, as far as I understand, is from an earlier time in McCarthy's life when he was like, I mean, this is pretty fucking bleak. It's a pretty fucking bleak story. Oh, God.
And he was also writing, a lot of his stuff is a lot darker and a lot more spare. And that kind of like, it doesn't end necessarily, but after Blood Meridian, which is like really, really bleak, he he switches gears a little more to being a little more upbeat and a little more like
a little more cheerful with
a little more full with his storytelling, like a little more he becomes a better writer. Like Blood Meridian I think is a brilliant book, but he becomes a little more like his stories, in my opinion, become a lot more full and satisfying after Blood Meridian, basically. But Child of God is from that early period when I've read a couple of those early books and I'm not a big fan of them. They're not like his best work, honestly. And then apparently last year, John Hillcoat, who adapted The Road, he was in talks.
Oh my God.
To make Blood Meridian with John Logan, the writer who wrote Alien Covenant and Gladiator and The Aviator, like a hugely powerful writer.
Whoa.
John Hillcoat, normally I wouldn't have much of a reaction to that, but I truly think that The Road is one of the best adaptations of any
100%,
book ever made.
Oh,
like
yeah.
it's so accurate
So
to
effective.
how that book is, and it's a fucking really good movie.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, Ridley wanted to make Blood Meridian. He couldn't. Stayed in touch with McCarthy and started making this movie.
Wow.
The saddest thing about this film is that in the middle of production was when Tony Scott died. So Ridley had to stop production to go be with his family. That was very sad. He returned and finished the film. Recently, Ridley Scott has he's a man of opinions, let's say. And recently he did talk about how he thought this movie would be a much bigger hit, and he blamed Fox for the terrible marketing of the film, which is a very Ridley Scott thing to do, but also not surprising. He just he said it was terribly marketed. I mean, I watched a couple trailers for it, and it was like, I mean, it looks okay, but I guess it makes it look a lot more exciting than it ends up being for it.
Yeah.
It makes it look a little bit more like Sicario.
Well, you gave Cameron Diaz a gold tooth and leopard tattoos, cheetah tattoos.
Yeah.
And a Barbados accent from what I hear. So,
yeah.
You know, and then they go in and then it's just like 40 minutes of poetry in the form of dialogue.
Now, my last little thing, Guillermo del Toro loves this movie.
Hell yeah.
He has stood up for it for a long time. And I want to read a very long quote from him if I can.
Yeah, hit me.
But in a thing I read about him, he was talking about this movie and he compared it. Remember in the middle of us watching this, I was like, have you ever seen Killing Them Softly? Guillermo del Toro compared it. He was like, much like Killing Them Softly, which is like, it's a Brad Pitt movie, but it has a very similar kind of vibe to it. I love that film a lot. Speaking of Andrew Dominic, a person in director's jail for shooting out of a uterus. And not being born, I mean by you putting using a camera.
Shooting out of a uterus.
But Guillermo del Toro really liked this movie. And he said about it, I don't know if I subscribe to the term underappreciated because I think each movie finds its audience. We all know that this is a business, but we also should acknowledge that it's an art. And like a painting or a movie or a dinner play, a film often finds its audience that absolutely loves it on a molecular level. And it may be a handful of people, or it may be a lot of people, but The Counselor, to me, is filled with things that, as a Mexican, I understand on that level. I know that death and finality and tragedy exist right around the corner in everybody's life. Once you cross that line, as Ruben Blades says, the world will not take you back.
Damn.
This guy should fucking write
He
reviews,
should fucking write
man.
reviews.
He nails it.
He wrote it with heart, though. He didn't really write anything about the film itself. He's just a feeling that he shares with other nerds like us.
I love it.
We fucking love it. We
Yeah.
love it when the man is sad and he cries.
Yeah,
in his car.
he deserves
I do.
it. Yeah.
I love when men cry. It's my favorite thing.
Yeah. Speaking
not like that, but
so speaking of Sicario, one of the things I thought about a lot of this is that this movie is in this lineage of like border content, which like started with not started, but like in my kind of film going life starts with like Traffic.
Oh yeah.
Kind of perfects itself a little bit with No Country for Old Men.
Mm-hmm.
Miami Vice also has shades of this kind of thing.
Yeah.
This movie is kind of like a proto Sicario.
You mean just like the tone of it, like the sepia shit?
Well, like the whole the kind of like Mexican drug war border film.
Yeah.
I think Sicario is one of the most perfect versions of that.
Yeah.
And Sicario 2 I think is very good too. But this movie is like it's a movie that's about the same things but it's concerned with different themes than Sicario. Sicario is much more of a political thriller in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I think that movie's amazing. Sicario shifts the focus into like the more socio-political idea behind it, which I think is carried into Sicario 2.
Yeah.
And then that director, Salima, he goes on to make 000, which I think is like currently the apex of like the border drug
TV program.
It's a TV show, but it's like it's of film quality and is like such a interesting and impeccably constructed series.
Well, Breaking Bad, Texas adjacent.
Very good point. That like very especially later Breaking Bad, very it really and Better Call Saul for the same reasons.
Yeah.
But that really like popularized it a lot too, because there's a lot of stuff where they expand Breaking Bad into like the Mexican border and things like that, which that's a very good point.
And some parts of Entourage. When they're filming, when Vinny, young Vinny plays Pablo Escobar.
Entourage is a genre of its own. So if you could please not stain it with this type of
I'm sorry, you're right.
nonsense. Also, I mean, speaking of Pablo Escobar, like Narcos, which I haven't seen, El Chapo, all that shit. Like Netflix was like, oh, we fucking love border stuff. Triple Frontier is a fucking great example. It's very similar, even though it's set in Colombia. Mm-hmm. It's set on the Triple Frontier, actually. God. But like it's in this lineage of this type of movie, which I love. I love these types of films. Yeah.
And
big fan.
It has sort of picked up in popularity as its own kind of fetishized genre almost.
It's like true crime, but drugs.
So because I know in the 80s at least, it was a lot of that was more true crime focused in a way that it's like, oh, neighborhood murders or psychopaths.
Yeah.
Or that kind of horror, to now turning into a very real, very organized crime horror. Yeah. And in this movie, it's like, it's just a sense of existential dread at all times. Yes. Because you've walked into the room because of all the choices you made in life. You happen to be ignorant enough to walk into this room, and everything that happens to you now is beyond you. It's your fault.
Well, yeah, this much like No Country for Old Men, this movie is a philosophy text wrapped in a film. Like with a film wrapped around it. Like a lot of that stuff, like Narcos and all those kinds of things. I've seen a little bit of Narcos, and like they're good and all, but they are much more like, they're like, what is happening here is just like fact. What we're showing you is just this like fictionalized fact, and it's very straight down the line. And I want to say like glorifies it, but it definitely makes it more fun. And also I will say, I think a big part of it there, I think there's a couple factors at play. A big part of it is the constant conversation about the border in the United States politically, even more so than in like the George Bush era, because there's things at the border that people are like, oh, illegal people crossing, and there's people in the United States who are undocumented and stuff like that, and I think that's wrong. No, I'm kidding, I don't care. But there's that, and then there's a huge drug crisis, which is like drugs coming from Mexico or from other places, like all this kind of stuff is like very much a focal point in the conversation. And I have to speculate that I think the positive effects of television and movies trying to expand the types of people who tell stories beyond white guys like myself, like into having people who are from Central and South America as say showrunners or show creators or show writers and all these things, really like fueled those types of stories in a way. And I think that's a good thing. Like, I think that's no surprise that like Mexican Americans or Central Americans and things like that have a larger creative voice, and that's cool. So I think there's a combination of factors that make these very hot stories right now. I do think Sicario is like a big turning point, though. And this movie is just a couple years before, and most people were like, what the fuck was that? But I think there are shades of those in this film, such as a man getting his head cut off by a wire. Twice.
And the setup is almost worth waiting for, because they talk about it at great length. The things that are about to happen to these characters. Yeah. There's like 10-15 minutes of just conversations about, this lady's gonna fuck my car, but you're gonna hear about it.
There's a sick joy in the process. Yeah. When Sam Spruill sets up the wire, it's like a long scene of like, you're like, oh, I know exactly what's gonna happen, and yet they still show him setting it up.
They show the whole thing.
and you got to see it. And it's the same with Brad Pitt dying at the end. Is like Rainier has to be like, do you know what a bolito is? Do you want to know the weird story behind how I even heard about this film?
No. Yes, I do, but like, how did you hear about it? No, or no.
Absolutely not. No. Okay, moving on. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Tell me all that. I don't know. Yeah.
The author Bret Easton Ellis had a podcast where he would complain about how hard it was to be like white and stuff. No, I'm just kidding. He had a podcast like a decade ago. He still might have one. I don't know. It seems like a ripe time for like a contrarian weirdo to have a podcast.
100%. I subscribe to that shit hard.
Yeah, but I remember very specifically, it was like around 2013 when this film came out. And he would have like other weirdos on his pod and he would talk to them. And Bret Easton Ellis, like whatever you think of the guy, he was a very interesting conversationalist and had very interesting views. He was a contrarian and he would say some stuff. I'll bring one up in a second where you're just like, what the fuck are you talking about? But interesting guy. He talked to interesting people and he would talk constantly to people about 2 films from that year. One, which is was ridiculous and I think absurd, is Blue is the Warmest Color. The film about two French chicks like scissoring each other. Yeah, it's a terrible movie.
What?
but like at the time it was like people were like, we've never seen gay women before. So good thing they're kind of hot in this. Like, it's such a terrible I think it's like a weirdly, I found at least, I felt like, I was like, this is like half porn anyway. So it's like, I feel a little dirty watching it, but like, then it's like, but also Academy Award worthy. I'm like, no, not really. Like, it's not that Academy Award worthy. I remember reading a review of that film where someone was like, it looks like a movie about lesbians where there's only 2 women on set.
Damn. Okay.
But Bret Easton Ellis, big fan of it. He used to talk about it all the time. And this film, but what he would say about this movie always was, he was like, it's got the best death scene ever. Oh. And people were like, really? I've never even heard of it. Much like you. They're like, I've never even heard of it. He's like, trust me, it has the best death scene ever. And he's talking about when Brad Pitt gets the bolito over his neck. Yeah. And he was correct.
Because you think Brad Pitt might still get out of it because he's Brad Pitt. Like, oh, maybe he'll live.
Do you? Because when he takes his hat off and leaves it in the cab, I was like, oh shit. He takes his big bucket hat off. Yeah.
And then he loses his fingers and then some.
It's fucking brutal.
It's great.
Yeah. I think there's something interesting in that scene because it's actually cut down. There's an extended version of it.
Come on. Yeah, longer?
I know. Yeah.
Yikes.
But I think there's something interesting in that scene in the Brad Pitt talks about the violence that the cartel inflicts on people and how it's like, it's showy, right?
Make a point.
They make snuff films, but they also like there's been sensationalized accounts in real life of the cartel. They do these things in public, right? In Sicario, there's a scene where they drive by a bridge and there's people lynched on this bridge, right? Yeah. And it's a point of making this violence plain to people to be like, this is what happens when you fuck with the cartel, basically. Which like I don't know how much of that is true and stuff.
But why wouldn't it be? Because like fear is like the currency.
Yeah.
And they lose all credibility if you could just steal from the cartel millions at a time and have no consequences.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. Fear is the mind killer. That's the cartel are all big
them and Atreides.
Yeah. But like that scene where Brad Pitt dies is disgusting. But what always strikes me about it is the fact that he's surrounded by people and there are like gawking. Like they're like the whoever the extras are all in that scene are perfect. They're just like their mouths helpless. Are just hanging open because it's one of the most absurd things they've ever seen. Like it is, and Brad Pitt is like, he's very good in this film. Yeah.
He's fucking good in everything, man.
Even Fight Club.
See, that's the thing though. When Brad Pitt shows up for only a moment, you're like, oh shit, Brad Pitt, and then you just forget that it's him.
Yeah.
You immediately go, oh, he's Westerly or whatever. He's this Westray.
Yeah.
But one face that is very unforgettable is Javier Bardem.
Well, that's because he's dressed like a psycho.
Javier Bardem in fucking House of Ridley. Just
House of Ridley?
Because he's got the Gucci fit on,
oh,
baby.
Yeah. So
head to toe in Versace.
I read competing things about this.
Oh.
This film had some kind of deal with Armani.
Okay. Yeah, that tracks.
So Diaz is in a bunch of Armani, but they literally had Armani designed some clothes for this film.
Like tacky shit.
Well, not necessarily. I don't know.
Sorry.
Excuse me. Armani.
High fashion.
We're still trying to pitch like advertisers, and Armani, as you know, I'm a huge
Armani.
fan. Jesus.
Oh,
Giorgio, sorry for my
Sorry,
partner.
Giorgio.
God, I'm head to toe in Juventus Armani.
Please, babe, he goes by Giorgio.
Giorgio.
Giorgio, sorry.
Armani. But I did also read that Rainer is entirely costumes in Versace.
Yeah,
Now,
there you are.
As a person who's like, I'm super knowledgeable about this world. As you know, I've seen House of Gucci.
Twice.
Are they the same? No, they're
No.
complete. They're competitors.
They're different
right?
people.
So I wonder if that was accurate, because I did read the Versace thing on IMDb, and that is famously
it's like
only written by Michael Bay.
Likely Versace. I just said Gucci because House of Ridley.
He does.
So good
He
to
is
pass up.
very. He could have been in House of Gucci.
Yeah.
Honestly, he could have played Lady Gaga's
Bardem
character.
looks like
Yeah.
he's 100% electrocuted at all times. Great hair
Also,
choice.
his hair. Yeah.
Just boof, standing on end.
It's so funny. The famous thing that Bardem said when he played Anton Chigurh was he was like given that haircut, and he was like, "Oh my god, I'll never get laid again." And I was like, "Bro, have you seen this film?" Like, yeah,
This'll do it.
Yeah.
This'll do it. He is his like style, and both him and Cameron Diaz like gauche. It's very out there. It's very too much. Cameron Diaz especially has like fucking gold incisors or whatever. And
yeah, she got like a gold tooth and the paw prints and
tats and the nails, and even without the accent, it's like so much.
yeah.
When Cameron Diaz talks, something about her voice doesn't match her face, doesn't match her body.
She did redub her lines, remember?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Fair enough.
In contrast, Penelope Cruz is a smoke show.
Incredible.
She
Incredible.
She's overqualified to play the part she's playing.
Definitely.
She's
I thought
very good.
They could have swapped it. They could have had Penelope be the crazy Cameron Diaz character.
Yeah, Penelope's not given enough to do, but also
No, what
when
a
you
waste.
think about her role, she is literally the victim. Like she is the most victimized. She has no idea why it's happening, and then she gets
Deaded.
horrible. It's horrible what happens to her.
It's
She is-
worse
yeah.
because she's hot. And when
I
hot
know
people
and
die,
It's awful when hot people.
That's
die.
my
That
least
is-
favorite.
Yeah, that's the least favorite kind of death. Do you
Javier
wanna-
Bardem, not one death. No, he does.
He dies hardcore.
He dies
Do you want to talk about
hardcore.
the plot? Speaking of which,
Let's get into it.
I do want to say one more thing.
Yeah.
This movie is also, speaking of Penelope Cruz, Cameron Diaz, this movie is full of big names.
Yeah.
It also has absurd bit parts for just guys who you're like, I fucking know that guy.
that guy. He's that guy.
So Edgar Ramirez shows up in one scene. I absolutely love Edgar Ramirez.
Yeah.
Bruno Gans, we'll talk about his scene as the jeweler.
Uh-huh.
Bruno Gans is so fucking good in this too. We got John Leguizamo
There he is.
and Dean Norris make a cameo. That's
Incredible.
one of the most delightful scenes in this film. We got rock and roller Toby Kebbell.
Of course,
He
playing
shows up in one season
playing a
Texan.
Texan.
Yeah.
with the it's just yeah, damn.
Fucking Nico from ER, Goran Visnich, is just in the last scene, and he's just like, "Hey everyone, I wanted to pop in and tell you I'm still the sexiest man alive."
Okay.
For some reason, I don't act, but whatever. He's such a fucking hot guy. Rosie Perez is in like 2 scenes. Natalie Dormer pre Game of Thrones, but like still comes a big name.
Hell yeah.
And then Sam Spruill, who I pointed out, I was like, that's a fucking Game of Thrones guy. He's not. However, he is amazing in Steve McQueen's Amazon film Mangrove. He plays this like racist cop, but when you look at his face, you're like, this guy's
You're like, yeah, that
this
tracks.
is a hard ass man. And he's really good in that fucking he's such a face.
Damn,
man.
it's like
so
the bit parts of bit parts with these names.
Oh, it's awesome. Like every second sequence is like, oh, you have a completely overqualified actor to do this one little bit. And
Yeah.
it's like it's the power of Ridley Scott. It like really is.
Man.
All right, you had a question. Tell me.
It's very pertinent to this plot.
Okay.
That they have 2 cheetahs, right?
Yeah.
I don't know what that means. If it's meant to symbolize freedom or whatever, or being
Yeah.
trapped. But if you had two cheetahs, what would you call them?
Bill and Wilma.
How will the cartel take it seriously if they're gonna be called Bill and Wilma? Cheetahs aren't even white.
They fucking are.
You gave them.
They are now.
Names.
One thing I said earlier about the Manola Dargis said the thing about Cormac McCarthy not having ever read a book on how to write a screen story, which is a compliment, but he does follow one of those crucial writing advice things, which is from Anton Chekhov, where he says, if you have two cheetahs, they have to eat someone by the end.
Yeah.
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 If you put two cheetahs on the shelf in Act 1, they gotta be dangerous.
Look,
that's what Chekhov always said.
This whole movie is full of Chekhov's guns, because every 5 minutes they're like, hey, we're going to talk about a wire. Boom, wire appears.
Yeah.
Hey, don't worry about that headless guy. He's going to be headless.
Oh, it's like foreshadowing. It's
every time.
I actually think the foreshadowing, the reason it's so effective is like, okay, we talked about what lies beneath. I don't know if people will have heard that by now or not. Doesn't matter. Dumb movie, but silly. Okay, remember how I said that when they go across the bridge, he's like, you can't get signal here. You see the scaffolding of the film being written on screen while you're watching it. You're like, oh, that's like a writing thing so that you know for later, right?
Yeah.
Placing a little thing, you hang a lantern on it, as some people say. And later it clocks in your head. You're like, I know what's going on.
But it's like thrown at you, real like passing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What I think is really brilliant about this movie is that this movie is about fate and creating destiny. And so when Javier Bardem says offhandedly to Fassbender, and you notice they say things like, he's like, have you ever heard of a bolito? That happens to Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt says to Fassbender, have you ever heard of these snuff films? That happens to Penelope Cruz. Like, these things are like, they're planted there in a very obvious way, but you're like, it ramps the tension up more, in my opinion. And then it also makes the moment with the bolito so dreadful, and it makes the moment when Fassbender gets the DVD so dreadful, because you're like, oh, I don't need to rack my brain for what is happening here.
Yeah, you're fully ready.
But I think it works thematically in the film because the film is so concerned with creating destiny.
So dreadful when Cameron Diaz fucks her car.
Yeah.
It's truly.
It's
the way he describes it is my favorite thing ever.
I will say that I think Javier Bardem's running commentary and acting in that scene is really good. To be fair to that scene, which I think is absurd, Javier Bardem does say, he's like, I've never seen anything like that. He's
afraid of it, and he's disgusted by it. He's like, it's like a blowfish or whatever.
That's so disgusting.
It's
so gross.
The visceral imagery of him talking about, little Diaz on a car windshield.
Nah.
Not good for nobody.
Let's talk about the plot. In Mexico, this cocaine is packaged in barrels and concealed in a sewage truck. It's driven across the border to the U.S., and it's stored in a sewage treatment plant. The counselor, we start with him and Cruz, right? Not Tom, Pamela.
Pamela?
Penelope. Fuck me.
It's like Bill and Wilma all over again.
Bill and Wilma, yeah. They're in bed. It's a little thematic. They're doing the oral sexes to each other.
Gross.
Typically, it's morning. What do you want?
People of God.
People of God. He wants to marry her. Life is being in bed with her. That's what he says. He goes to Amsterdam, and he wants to get a diamond from Bruno Ganz. This scene is way longer than it needs to be for this film.
That's what I'm saying.
It does not need to be like this, but it's
effective still.
It's also
you think he'll come back at some point. You think it's gonna have some kind of meaning. Him describing a diamond in like great detail about how to study it, about what like a color means, or
it's a theme setting scene, and I will say it's one of the coolest scenes in the film. I think it's
so good.
Fucking incredible. I think it's so good.
And you can't just forget it, right? Even though it has nothing to do with the rest of the film, the guy never comes back.
Yeah.
It just stays with you. It's so good.
There's a great line where he's like looking at these diamonds, and he's like, Fassbender says, he's like, I want to get her something that she won't be afraid to wear in public.
Yeah.
And Bruno Ganz says, I think you'll find she's a lot braver than you think.
She's got more courage.
And it's like, it's such a great little dig. That line is like this throwaway. And it also exhibits a lot of like, McCarthy has a weird humor. Like he a lot of his stuff can be quite funny when it's not about like babies hanging from trees and things like that. Like you would think like No Country for Old Men is a great example that you would think that the Coen brothers put like a humorous twist on some of his writing.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, a lot of that shit is right from the fucking book. Like a lot of it is like, yes, the acting between like say Harrelson and Brolin in certain scenes is like they make it a little funnier, but that dialogue is straight from the book, and the Coen brothers recognize that that's got humor to it. And yeah,
I was gonna say that maybe there's like hints of McCarthy writing about the ladies in a way that it's like, oh, the old ball and chain a little bit, which it may or may not be true, because every time they kind of reference a woman in the thing, it's like, you can do anything to a woman except, you know, bore her, like she can't be bored. Or, you know, a character like Penelope Cruz kind of almost always in bed or just looking sexy as hell, but that's not her fault. She's just hot. But then it's not like on the other side, he's not writing about men in an encouraging way at all. They're all either victims or idiots or animals.
McCarthy's not known for his portrayal of women in like a positive light, I wouldn't say, but I also don't,
I feel like neither he does for men.
Like, not that he needs it, but like my defense of it is that omitting, like, I don't think he could be accused of misogyny by omission, in my opinion. Like,
sure,
just because he doesn't write particularly strong women, or in lots of cases in films write women at all. I mean, not films, novels, write women at all. I don't think you can be like, oh, he's a misogynist because he doesn't do this thing.
No,
but I also think in this film, like with Cruz, she's with a scummy guy, and she's an kind of innocent woman, right?
Yeah.
Like, even though she talks about being like born again or someone with God with Cameron Diaz, isn't the implication in that scene that they had maybe done it?
Yep.
Right? Mm-hmm. And Cruz, like we said, is the victim in this. She is victimized by the counselor's greed and by his fucking, essentially by whatever. But I want to back to that line where he says, I think that you'll find she's braver than she is.
Yeah.
That is basically the same, like the film being like, greed changes people. And like these things change people.
Yeah. And he's not being, gender specific about it. He's not being like women this or men that. He's just, all your fates are sealed by being in this universe.
Yeah.
Somehow Cameron Diaz still comes out on top.
Yes. And the extended version of this scene with the diamond dealer is so fucking cool. And it's so interesting. He says something to Fassbender in Spanish. And Fassbender is like, oh, you're Sephardic. He's like, do you know anything about Spain? So Sephardic Jews were Jews in Spain, basically. And Gans, like, he gives this monologue about Spain and about how every culture that has expelled Jews from their culture is a dying country or something like that. Because he talks about the fact that, like, and I'm going to talk about this, but I'm not smart enough to know how this is like fully connected to the themes of the film. But he talks about how the Semitic culture is the final culture of Western civilization because God is so ingrained in Western culture, and the God of Western culture is the Jewish God. And how he's like, there will be no culture after this. We are the final culture of Western people.
Shit, right.
It's very, very fascinating. And he brings a higher carat diamond to Fassbender, and he shows him the difference between the two, the one that Fassbender is looking at and the one that he shows him, which is like, this is like, he's like, a perfect diamond would just be made of light. But all of these diamonds, we care about them because of their flaws. He says this like interesting thing. A diamond is a way to adorn the person you love, to announce to the darkness that we won't be diminished due to the brevity of our lives. I was like, that's such a fucking interesting, like, it's such a fascinating line. Like, I really,
it's like he can fucking write or something.
It's like this motherfucker knows how to write shit.
He's so goddamn good.
So he gets his diamond. He goes back to the States. We find out he's involved with this drug dealer with Rainer. Rainer is like a fucking party boy in all Versace and just like but he's like a quasi businessman, wealthy dude who makes money through these drug dealings. Essentially,
bad means.
They want to open a club together, which is, I mean, clue number one that you're not dealing with the least scummy people on earth.
Yeah.
Raynor describes the bolito to the counselor in this scene, which is, you know, foreshadowing. He proposes to Penelope Cruz. He has the meeting with Westray, which we've talked a lot about. Again, that scene is like, there's an extended version of it that's awesome. It's like very, very good, but it's like the diamond dealer scene and this scene, they're both like extended versions are like 8 minutes long, which is really long.
Just
for
two guys chatting.
Yeah. And again, full of thematic stuff that I'm not fully like, I'm like, I don't fucking know. I'm a fucking idiot.
Because for the first hour of the film, you just see the counselor, Fassbender, go from scene to scene, talking to different people. None of these worlds are connected. I don't know what the fuck's happening.
You see the drugs move, and you see the biker move. That's it. That's kind of it. And you're like, I don't know what this is.
They haven't established anything, no names, no motivation, nothing.
They also, one of the things which might be frustrating to viewers of this film is that it's not even clear that the drugs in the sewage truck are the same drugs that they're talking about.
Yeah.
And it's not even clear how this has all been facilitated fully, you know?
Yeah.
It's very interesting that way. And it's kind of opaque in that way. And that's part of it. You could argue it could be a strength, could not be.
Mm-hmm.
So he goes to visit Rosie Perez in prison, and she asks him to, this is like the one key to his downfall, is that she asks him to bail out the son, who is the biker, who we have seen. He got arrested, which happens. We don't see that happen. Gets arrested off screen. Michael Fassbender agrees to do it. The other thing too, which I'd forgotten until we watched it this time, I'd seen this movie before. There's not really any clear scene where Malkina, Cameron Diaz, is like, I'm going to fuck everyone over.
No, never. But she's also made it very clear that she doesn't like anyone. And
Bardem has made it clear that he's like, I don't know if I trust her.
He's also afraid of her.
I'm afraid of her.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I trust her either. Yeah.
I mean, I'm afraid of her. Holy shit.
I'm afraid of her too. When she did to that car. She could do it. She could do it to any car.
She could do it to any car.
You could go out to the parking lot and she could be on your car.
No.
Right now.
No,
you know?
Miss Diaz, please.
To that, she hires these two other people, Sam Spruill and someone else, to help steal the drugs. Sam Spruill strings a wire across the highway that's unseeable. And
so that shit is so terrifying to me, man.
Oh, yeah.
It's in the middle of a desert. Before he does all that shit, he like very nonchalant walks into a bike dealership and measures from
how high
floor
the bike
to
is.
yeah.
Like I said, there's this indulgence in process, and that is like one of my favorite things.
It's like reading a book, but better.
And Sam Spruill is like I said, he's a real face. And when Sam Spruill does anything, you're just like, oh yeah, he's up to good. He's probably going to do something really nice for someone. He's probably measuring that because he wants to buy a gift for his son. No, Sam Spruill looks like he's like, I'm doing this to murder someone. Really horrific.
Yeah.
The biker is decapitated by the wire, and Sam Spruill unceremoniously steals the helmet with it's got the thing that helps the truck run. He kicks the head out of the fucking... It's a gory ass fucking scene, man.
And I've never seen anything like it.
I know. That's what's so good about this movie is there's a couple things where you're like, I've never seen anything
because
like that.
We're pretty desensitized to stuff like that, mostly just from having been on certain websites as a kid, against your will.
Gmail? Ever been there? It's horrible.
Don't get me started on Yahoo, man.
Yeah, Jesus.
It's a chaotic world.
Yahoo is for criminals, though.
It is a lawless wasteland on Yahoo.
He gets this thing that can start the truck that was in the sewage plant, and he steals it. He steals the truck, and they learn that everyone kind of at the same time learns that all of this is missing, which is not good. The cartel is like, hey, we want our money, and Counselor's like, oops, and Westray is like, we're all fucked, and we're all going to die. I'm going to leave, blah, blah, blah.
And the counselor in all of this is like, I haven't talked to a single drug ever. I've had no conversations with a cocaine. And then incidentally, they find out, you talked to the one lady who has a son who was doing a thing for us. And
I haven't talked to a single cocaine this whole time.
Not one.
But the cartel, like they said, that's the key that Fassbender says that's the coincidence. And he's like, they don't believe in those. Yeah. And it's the way that they can trace, his involvement
Yeah.
in this kind of thing.
Any connection.
Yeah.
You could be the fifth cousin twice removed. Doesn't matter. You're going down.
Sam Spruill and his other friend, his other buddy. And speaking of that, guys, his buddy who drives with him, he's the guy in Barbarian who has kidnapped the people and kept them in their basement. He's another guy who you're like, he's definitely up to not good things.
I hate that guy.
Yeah, they get attacked by cartel members posing as cops, and they get killed to death. The remaining cartel guy, he takes the truck and he drives it to its ultimate destination, which was Chicago. In Chicago, they have the scene with Johnny Legs and Dean Norris. Again, a thematic scene where they show that it's so funny because Johnny Legs is so desensitized that he's like, yeah, sometimes they fucking pop a body in one of these things and just to fuck with me. And Dean Norris is like, what do they do with the body? He's like, I don't know. He just drives around until like forever. Yeah. We just leave it in the truck and it drives around and around.
I love how he chuckles about it too.
Yeah.
Oh, John. He's like, they got a body in you.
Like, anyway, I got to go to my other job, which is cooking for the chef. I don't know.
Sorry, Mr. Favreau, coming right out.
Yeah. The counselor, who's basically Westray, fucks off. He's like, I'm gone. Counselor tries to get in contact with Laura. Laura is kidnapped. Westray takes off to London. The counselor goes to Mexico to try to basically like negotiate because he thinks he can. He can't.
No.
Laura is killed off screen, but although wait. Malkina basically tracks Westray to London, and Natalie Dormer steals his laptop codes and things like that. She transfers all his money. He gets bolitoed, finally.
Bolito.
The device that tightens around your neck until it cuts your head off, essentially. That sequence is one of the... It's very masterfully constructed because it's got great music, and there's a couple moments where like a guy will jog by very pointedly.
You know what's happening.
And then another guy will jog by. And
my God. And they keep delaying that tension, and you know it's coming.
Finally, they cut, and it happens. And you're just like, holy shit. And Brad Pitt is like, I know exactly what just happened to me. Right when he took his hat off, I swear.
But that's so great because his only reaction at the time is to just laugh. Brad Pitt's laugh is just another one of those things where it's like such a signature Brad Pitt move.
Yeah.
Where when he's in trouble, he does they bested me.
And
the
his
rascals.
when he yells like "fuck you" and like it's very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He tries to.
It's like one of those things. Like if you saw that in the street, you're just like, I don't even know what's happening right now. I can't even tell what's going on.
No.
The bolito, I guess we haven't even described it. It's like a wire. It's like a wire that's uncuttable that you put around someone's neck and then pull it, and it will continue tightening until it chokes them to death and or decapitates them. Apparently that's not real. That was made up for this film. So kudos to Cormac McCarthy for his inventiveness.
For engineering.
Counselor has a long conversation with Hefe, and Hefe says, you can't do anything about this, but you're alive. And the counselor is like, yes, but at what cost? And then he's delivered a DVD with apparently a snuff film of Laura being decapitated. That's horrible to think about. It's so horrible the film doesn't show it, but they do show her body getting dumped in a landfill, which is pretty awful. Headless body, yes. It's pretty horrible. And then the final scene basically is Malkina meets with her banker, played by Goran Visnich, and she's like, I'm going to go to Hong Kong now that I'm really wealthy.
Now that my baby cheetahs are dead.
Right, yeah. Rainier gets tracked by the cartel and killed. Yeah. Only one of them died. The other one is still roaming the Texas wilds.
She's free somewhere.
She's out there.
Wet Wendy.
Wilmer.
Wet
Wendy. Wet Wendy the cheetah. Yep. That's her name.
That's pretty cheetah.
Very Tiger King of you.
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah, and that's the film The Counselor. This movie fucking rocks. It's a true cult film. One of very rare recent cult films. I mean, it came out last decade, but
don't watch it with your friends.
It's violent and really nihilistic, and it will make you feel sad about the world.
Watch it when
great fucking movie.
It's raining out, and you want to really get into something. You want to get knucks deep in something.
Yeah.
It's gonna be this.
Put your phone away.
Put it away.
Be in the moment.
Seriously.
You got anything else about this film?
Just that I didn't know something this good existed, and it solidified my faith in really liking cinema as a piece of art, as a feeling. Mwah.
Thank you for listening.
I'm Pete.
I'm John. It's a good movie.
It's a good movie.
Bye.